Ba-da-ba-da.
All right, hey folks. It looks like we are officially live. So great to see everyone trickling into this YouTube live stream, and hello and welcome. It is 10:59 over here in Santa Cruz, California. So we are about 1 minute early, giving folks the opportunity to settle into this live stream and get excited for today's program. So welcome. We're so excited that you're here. And as we're waiting for the program to officially start, please let us know in the YouTube live chat if you can't hear us for whatever reason. If you are running into some auditory problems, let us know and we'll try everything we can on our end to fix the issue. We are also starting a new feature for this Labside Chat program where we actually have closed captioning on the program. So hopefully that is coming through clearly. Again, let me know if you can't see it and we'll be able to try to fix the problem on our end. All right, so it is 11 o'clock, but let's give folks about 1 more minute to join us in this live stream. And as we are waiting to get started, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the YouTube live chat. We love to see where Seymour Center supporters are tuning in from and where they're watching. Go ahead and say hi, and you may even get a shout out from us today. All right, hi everyone and welcome. Fantastic. All right, so you know what? Let's officially get started. We don't really have any time to waste because we have a great program lined up for you. So hi everyone and welcome to another Labside Chat with the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. My name is Jen Cormier and I will be your host today. If you have seen a Labside Chat before, welcome back. We're so happy that you're here. But if this is the first time that you're tuning in, today's program is an opportunity to have a short, engaging Q&A discussion with the scientists from UC Santa Cruz. And we'll be chatting about how scientific research plays a role in the conservation and understanding of the world's oceans. And today is a real treat because we have the pleasure of talking with and asking questions to Dr. Michael Beck. Dr. Michael Beck is the AXA Chair in Coastal Resilience, a research professor with the Institute of Marine Sciences, and an adjunct professor in the Ocean Sciences Department here at UC Santa Cruz. So Mike, thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to have you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. So Mike, I have tons of questions lined up for you that were all submitted in advance by community members. There's some really, really great questions and I really hope you're ready for them. It will be like a rapid fire round because there's a lot of great questions submitted. But I want to let everyone know that is watching at home today. If you have any questions for Mike during today's chat, please just go ahead and drop them in the YouTube live chat feature and we'll be able to answer those as well. So Mike, are you ready for these rapid fire questions coming your way?
Ready to go. Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So I just talked about your titles a little bit. I said that you're the AXA Chair of Coastal Resilience, you're a research professor with the Institute of Marine Sciences, et cetera. And I hear this term coastal resilience thrown around a lot. It seems to be a real hot topic, at least in the news now. I tend to see articles about it, PBS news specials describing what coastal resilience is. But just to make sure that I'm on the same page as you, can you describe or define what coastal resilience is?
Yeah, well, indeed, and it's really funny because we had I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, but I've been based here at the Marine Lab where I am in my office. I've been here for 20 years, but I was also for 20 years the lead marine scientist at the Nature Conservancy. And in the building in your background, we held a TNC workshop here where about 12 years ago now, we discussed what term we were going to use for the work that we're describing. And there was a big fight. I wanted it to be coastal resilience. And a bunch of people said, we don't really know what that means, and nobody's really using it at the time. And then I had folks who more recently have said, oh man, you made just such the right decision. It's a term used all over the place. But really what resilience encapsulates is the ability to withstand disasters, so to keep yourself safe or keep the coast safe. Resistance is sometimes what that's called, but it's now wrapped into resilience. And then the ability to bounce back or be resilient to return to your prior state after an impact, a disaster, a natural hazard. So resilience really incorporates these elements of being able to withstand or resist pressures and then being able to bounce back after them.
Yeah. So you are the guy, that made this term as popular as it is today.
Oh, well, we did have a lot to, I wouldn't say the guy, but I would say, if you look, you can see the term all over, Nature Conservancy tools. That was my team, and so we've done a lot to really help clarify not just what the term means, but how we measure it out there in the field and how we make it relevant for people in nature.
Definitely. And so how does your research now tie into that? Like, what type of questions are you trying to answer with what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, the really big things that our lab works on is one, assessing risk, in particular flood risk, but it can be erosion risk as well. But I would say we concentrate most on being able to assess current and future flood risk, adding both climate change and new coastal development patterns. But then we also really focus on what are the solutions for reducing those risks. And in particular, what are the natural solutions? So that is, what's the role of reefs in wetlands in helping to reduce flood risk, and how cost effective are those?
Yeah. And so when you say reefs and wetlands, those are the type of ecosystems that you're looking at. And these are coastal ecosystems, I have to believe.
Yeah, so in particular, on the reef side, we're looking at coral reefs and oyster reefs. And reefs work by breaking waves, and so thereby reducing flooding by dissipating that wave energy offshore. And then the wetlands that we look at are coastal marshes, salt marshes, and mangroves. And they work by essentially acting as a dam to incoming water. So they're really kind of holding back that surge that would otherwise flood the coastline.
Yeah. And how do you study these particular ecosystems when looking at coastal resilience? Like, what type of factors are you looking at? Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm an ecologist by training, and if you had told me 5 or 6 years ago that my team would be mostly coastal engineers and I would have more conversations with insurers than I do with other biologists, I would have thought you were crazy. But that is in fact what it has taken to be able to address these questions. So the short answer is, we use the same tools that engineers and insurers use for assessing risk and identifying those solutions. They've often applied those solutions to hard infrastructure, breakwaters, groins, jetties, and the like. And we've been adapting those tools to be able to ask the same questions for reefs and wetlands. That is, how effective are they at dampening these effects of flooding? And then once we can figure out how much those flooded areas have changed because you've put in a new reef or wetland, then we can figure out the economics. How much people and property is that protecting?
Yeah, so when you're figuring out the economics, are you actually able to put like a monetary value on natural ecosystems?
Yeah, indeed. For this service, the flood protection, the coastal protection benefits, it is completely fair to say that our team has done, our team of collaborators, and I can talk more about some of who those are, has done more than anyone to be able to rigorously quantify these benefits. And so we can say that if we lost a meter of reef, coral reef around the world, the costs of storms would double. We show, for example, with USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, right around the corner here, our partners, we've shown for U.S. reefs that annually they reduce flood damages by 1.8 billion across all the states and territories with coral reefs. And we've done the same thing for lots of other habitats in lots of other countries. And we can show you where they're most effective and how valuable they are.
Wow. So I have to ask that throughout your work, we're seeing bigger storms, increased storm surges. So what are you seeing now in terms of this coastal resilience? Are these ecosystems holding up to these larger storms? Are we facing more of a threat? What's going on?
Yeah, well, let's parse this into two things. I'd like to cover. One is the growing risk, and then we'll talk about the solutions. Because yes, we are seeing increasing storminess, and this is a real concern for us. But I think it's also important to know that at least in the current time, because people talk about sea level rise as increasing risk, and it most certainly is, and increasing storminess even worse in terms of risk. But right now, in the near term, our risks are increasing the most because of the development choices that we make. So we're putting people and property at great risk. Yes, climate is a concern, but there are things that we can do about the decisions that we make now that could be better for risks to both people and nature. So I don't want folks walking away thinking, oh, well, this is just a problem that can only be handled by things like the Climate Convention in Paris. And no, these risks, what's happening is a local decision. They're being made in your localities. There's something you can do about that. Okay, sorry, that's one hobby horse of mine. And then let's talk about habitats. Actually, habitats are incredibly effective at reducing risk. So we basically showed for coral reefs around the world, one of the very first papers that we published in 2014 with an Italian grad student who had come to the lab to work here. We showed that reefs can reduce 97% of the wave energy that would otherwise hit coastlines. And some of those measurements that we were collecting from the literature had actually been done in hurricanes. So even during the biggest events, and the best way for me to sort of characterize this for people thinking about is, think about if you were here on the shores of Santa Cruz, and we're talking about rocky reefs, or on the shores of Hawaii and coral reefs. And you might be on a beach and you've got your umbrella drink and you're standing there with little tiny waves lapping up against your toes, and you're looking offshore and you see 14-foot waves, people surfing on 14-foot waves offshore, but you're seeing just little ripples. That is the coral reef attenuating that wave energy, and that's exactly what they do in really big storms to prevent flooding. And we can see the same thing in marshes and mangroves as well.
Yeah, and so I want to ask you a little bit more about mangroves, because over here in Santa Cruz, I don't know if a lot of people know what a mangrove ecosystem is. At least I don't think I've seen one in person, actually. I might have when I was little and visited Florida, but I don't think I know what a mangrove ecosystem is. So if you could just explain a little bit more about what that ecosystem is, what it looks like, if there's any smells associated with it, what it could sound like, just to give folks a picture about these different ecosystems that you study around the world.
Yep. Well, the first thing to know is that essentially, so here in California, here right outside of the lab by the lagoon here, we have marshes. So in temperate areas, we have these wetlands that are essentially half submerged all the time. They're in the intertidal. And in temperate areas, which is to say most of the US, marshes are what dominate those areas. But as soon as we get into subtropical environments, then we move from having marshes in that ecotone, as it were, that intertidal area in embayments and the like. We moved to mangroves. And so mangroves dominate that same area, here in the US from South Florida or partway down the Baja Peninsula. They then dominate the rest of the tropics, and they're much bigger than marshes. So they're trees, full on trees, and they are incredibly good at land building. So that means that they're trapping sediments, and they have these knees that hold them into the ground, and they're trapping sediments in those, and they're actually building up land. And so they can be incredibly effective at helping to reduce future risk from sea level rise, because they can actually keep up with it by building that land. So of the sorts of sites that smells well, they are extraordinarily difficult to walk through. So it's very muddy, and it is some of the densest forests, because you not only have the trees, but you have all of these knees, and it is really impossible to get through. Anybody who studies mangroves, or instantly field mangroves, I instantly have respect for, because of just how difficult it is.
Yeah. Well, thanks for painting that picture for us. So I have to believe that a big part of this also has to deal with the human element, right? So you can evaluate these ecosystems as, buffers to storm surges, et cetera. But just, if people don't act on this, or if people don't do anything about it, what happens? And so am I on the right track here, or am I just completely wrong?
No, that's exactly what I was saying about, the kind of coastal development choices. I mean, right now we talk about all of these external factors, but it really comes down to the choices that we're making in our communities every day that increase our risk. You'll see on the news all the time about Miami being sunny day flooded. There's more flooding, and climate change is a real concern, and it most certainly is. But even after some of the terrible storms that have come through Miami, if you're in downtown Miami near the coast, I'm just agog at what they're building there. I mean, and where they're building it. I mean, we are still making crazy decisions with our risk. And by our risk, I mean taxpayers, US taxpayers, in the end, are basically paying for the decisions that we make, because we're the ones who are going to foot the recovery bill when those buildings get destroyed.
Mhm. Yeah, so better decision making. And so when you say that, how can individuals like me, how can we, what else can we do, right? So I don't sit on a decision making board about where we're going to make the buildings, but what can I do as an individual to help, put the science out there and say, look at what Mike's doing and his team is doing. They are producing all of these scientific papers, et cetera. We have the science to back it up. How can I help support your work and get your word out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple things that you can do. I mean, it is great how active folks are in recognizing changing risk, and people are highlighting this in many different ways, whether it's the fires around here, or the flood risks, or more named hurricanes this season than in the Northern Hemisphere than ever before. I mean, you're like. But I think it's important that every time you say something about, say, climate change increasing risks, you should also be thinking and saying, but our local choices actually increase risk as well. And part of it is conditioning yourself to understand that that's part of real risk that you need to be communicating to others, and then to start communicating it to the decision makers. Locally, there are all kinds of county planners, hazard managers responsible for making decisions about what's allowable on our coast. And we need to be aware that when we're talking about coastal risk, we're all involved. And I mean everybody. If you're in Iowa, you're involved in helping to support coastal risk because FEMA's budget, a great deal of FEMA's budget goes to helping address those concerns, recover from those impacts on our coasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really smart. Even if you don't live in the coastal zone, it still impacts you. So, which is really important. So we got a really great question here about your collaborators, which you touched on a little bit already. And so I wanted to bring that out about who you collaborate with, because it sounds like a lot of your work, even though you are an ecologist, you are collaborating with engineers and policymakers, insurers. And so it sounds like to get involved in this work, you don't necessarily have to be a marine biologist. So can you tell us a little bit more about who your collaborators are and what they do to hopefully, reduce risk against it?
Yeah, glad to, and because I think that a real hallmark of our work is how we collaborate, and so I think that is really important. And I'll just point to the kind of what I consider to be my top four collaborative supporters, and you'll get a feel for how different they are. So I still work very closely with the Nature Conservancy, so a conservation NGO, very important to the work that we do. I collaborate with the U.S. Geological Survey, who just has great data and great insight in being able to look at these coastal data, understand the changes. We have a great partnership. I work very closely with all of the biggest reinsurance companies around the world, and that includes AXA, whose research fund is supporting the chair that I now occupy. But it also includes Munich Re and Swiss Re and Lloyd's of London, and we gain a lot from their insights about risk and how to measure it. And then lastly is the World Bank. And so I work very closely with them because actually they are in many ways some of the most important disaster risk managers for many countries, supporting recovery all around the world and doing what they can to reduce risks and the social vulnerability of the people facing those risks. And so you can see that's a really diverse group of partners. And I might do the same analysis. So we might go in and assess how reefs and wetlands are protecting coastlines, but then each one of those partners wants the answer in a slightly different way. So just by way of quick example, the insurers, so with the World Bank, they want it somehow related in one way or another to gross domestic product, GDP, and the way that economists think about, what really matters and what's valuable in one way or another gets tied to GDP. So I can turn the data into that. On the other hand, the insurers, they just want to know what's the percent risk reduction. Are mangroves 15% or 20%? And they don't want me to give them a dollar value because they say, yeah, we know where you're getting your economics. And guess what? We have better data. We can't make that data public, but we have better data. So just give us the percent and we'll figure out the money end of this. And again, this is just working with partners. You just go, what do you need? I'm not going to try to come and tell you how you should look at our data. You tell me what you need, and I'm going to figure out how to make it fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. And so I am so curious about your background too, about how you got into this field of work. What led you down this path? And so have you always been interested in the science of it? Have you always been, or more interested in the policy of it? What was it like to get to this point that you are in now?
No, I've really only been working in kind of like this field very specifically for about the past 12 years. And again, I credit an Italian professor friend of mine for when I first started with the Nature Conservancy, maybe 22 years back now, said, oh, why don't you serve as an advisor to this project where we're bringing together engineers and ecologists. And those were early days for that kind of work, but I met a lot of people that I now collaborate really closely with. But it was only about 12 years ago that really started going, look, as we think about how to manage these coastlines, we really are going to have to recognize that we've got to meet multiple management objectives, and we've got to figure out how to do those together. And so solving a coastal protection problem for habitats and then having them find the right places where they can protect people, really important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I know that we have some aspiring scientists watching at home. So do you have any advice for those folks that are looking to explore the science field as a potential career path?
Well, my kids are both college age students, and a couple of things I always tell them are take a GIS course. These days, basically everything is spatial analysis. Everything on your phone, in one way or another, is using some sort of spatial analysis, and you ought to be ready to do that. I wish I had taken marine policy and Spanish in school. I would be doing things a little bit differently now. But the other really important thing that I realized kind of only later in my career is I got undergrad and a master's degree in environmental science. And because of that, I was interested in ecology, but I had to take courses in hydrology, geology, and atmospheric sciences. And I'm not sure I could tell you that I remember anything directly out of those courses. But what I did take away is that I was never afraid of really different fields and new information. And so when I have to work with the engineers on our team, or when we explore these problems, I'm not daunted that I'll be able to figure it out, or at least well enough that I can serve as the central glue to our team.
Yeah. So it sounds like, diversify your education pathway or what education courses you're taking, and don't be afraid to learn new things. That's what
Indeed.
I'm hearing.
Indeed. Absolutely.
Awesome. So we only have time for a few more questions, and this one's really interesting. It's actually about doing research in the time of COVID-19 with various shelter in place restrictions, travel restrictions, et cetera. So what have you and your lab been able to do during this time where so many of us are facing travel restrictions?
Yeah, so it's been very different for a large portion of my career. For 20 years, I was traveling nearly half time. I mean, I was on the road. It was too much, to be very honest with you. But I was traveling a lot, and always super interesting people, super interesting places, understanding the problems, understanding how they might need us to help them solve those problems has always been a very important part of our work. So I really do miss that. We get a bit of that on Zoom and the like, but there's still kind of nothing like being able to, particularly if you're talking about fields like, say, insurance that are not like necessarily natural to someone like myself. Being able to sit with experts in this is really important to be able to adjust our work appropriately. So we're able to cover some of that, but I do miss some of that travel and interaction and understanding of people's issues and how we might solve them. The modeling that we do, for the most part, we're able to continue doing unabated, as it were, for the most part. I feel like we're a bit off productivity wise, but it's just because you just can't interact, particularly when you have a diverse team. I got economists and engineers and spatial analysts and ecologists, and every once in a while, it sure would be nice to talk in person.
Yeah, I know we're all missing that in-person interaction. So thank you for sharing that. And I have to ask, when you were traveling around the world, meeting all these interesting people and seeing these unique places, I have to ask, do you have a favorite place that you went to, or your most memorable part of your career? What has been the most exciting place that you have done research in?
Yeah, well, I usually I have sort of a top five that I
Okay.
love. One was Palmyra, Palmyra Atoll, when nobody had landed on it in over 30 years. We were the first to get there, and we were involved in helping to buy and put in a conservation that really special place. Amazing, amazing, amazing. One of the other amazing memories was diving the grouper spawning and whale shark aggregations in Belize. Just amazing to see all these huge dog snappers and groupers spinning and releasing sperm and eggs, and a big whale shark coming out of the depths to feed on it, and a dolphin bow riding the front of the whale shark as it's coming up out of the abyss. Amazing. There's a bunch of memories like that that I'm so fortunate to have been able to take part in the work that we do.
Yeah. What was the name of that atoll again?
Palmyra Atoll.
Okay, I'm looking that up as soon as this program is over.
And the whale sharks were in Belize near Lighthouse. I think it was a Lighthouse and Glover's Reef area off of there.
Well, that sounds incredibly beautiful and really, really amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Mike, I could ask you questions probably for the next 6 hours. Your work is so inspiring and really, really interesting. And what you're doing is so incredibly important. But since I don't have 6 hours to ask you questions, do you have a place online or a website where folks can go to learn more about you and your research in your lab?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. coastalresilience.ucsc.edu is where you can find everything about the work that we do.
Okay, awesome. I will make sure to also put that link down in the video description below so folks can easily find it. But I have to say, your website is beautiful and very informative, and just a really, really great place to be online. So I have to highly recommend people go to that website.
Yes, well, it has a lot to do with a grad student of ours, Jessie Kendall Barr. She's a terrific scientist and designer.
Yes, yes. Jessica is very, very talented. So again, thank you so much, Mike, for being here today. It was such a pleasure to speak with you and listen to what you are doing. Again, I just can't say how inspiring it is and how important it is. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jen. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. And right before we sign off, I do have a couple announcements for everyone watching at home about a couple upcoming Seymour Center events if you would like to tune in. The Seymour Center is hosting a 3-week virtual expedition starting on February 8th to learn how scientists are saving the oceans and protecting dolphins and whales from oceanic noise. So I will be dropping a link in the YouTube chat for folks to learn more, but it's a really exciting virtual experience. So we would love to have you join us. Additionally, and I also want to say a big thank you to everyone watching at home today and for tuning in to today's Labside Chat. It's really supporters like you that make these online programs possible. So if you're in the position, I ask that you consider making a donation or becoming a member of the Seymour Marine Discovery Center so we can keep these online programs running well into our 2021. And so more information can be found on our website, which is seymourcenter.ucsc.edu, or you can go ahead and click on the links in the video description below. But that is all the time that we have. So a big thank you to everyone again, and we will see you next time. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, we are no longer